All right. Well, good morning, everybody. This is Jomo Stewart and company here at the Fairbanks Economic Development Corporation. It is Tuesday, September 20th, right around 8 a.m. And our guests today for the Energy for All Alaska Task Force are our friends from ACUASI, the UAF Unmanned Aerial Vehicle Program. Sounds good. Okay. So Dr. Cathy Cahill, we have Jimmy, Mr. Parrish, but we also have a couple of extra friends here. We have Mr. Burgraff, tried and true, but we also have Mr. Wilkin. Just a couple of the special announcements. First, and I'll announce this or remind everyone at the end of the discussion. There's a small scale nuclear roundtable occurring tomorrow. I sent it out with the notices, so go ahead and check that out. If you want to hear more about small scale and micro nuclear, our friends at ACEP, the Alaska Center for Energy and Power, will be doing that presentation, I believe, tomorrow at Alaska Land. Either way, I'll make sure I send out the notice again, and I'll verify it before I make the final announcement. The way things are set up today, it's going to be a little hard for me to monitor the chat. So please, for those who have questions or comments, we're going to go back to the old days. Just go ahead. If you have a question or a comment, don't bother raising your hand. Just go ahead and take yourself off mute and politely make your request. Sounds good? All right. Well, without further ado, please, Dr. Cahill.
So thank you, Jomo, and thank you all for joining us. And I see a lot of good friends on the group here. So I'm going to skip some of the stuff that I often do. I knew that this was going to be a group that was on top of what we're doing and jump really into an update for what we've done in the past year. And that will take plenty of time because we've been a little busy. So onward. So in terms of we've been busy, that's kind of an understatement. As I'll discuss later, our budget went up over 500% in the last year.
Wow.
We are hiring, to put it mildly, we are hiring engineers, we are hiring pilots, we are hiring program managers, we are hiring data analysts. It is an exciting time to be part of ACUASI. We are assuming we are probably going to double in this year, which is incredibly exciting and terrifying at the same time. The good news is the foundation all of you have watched us laid over the past, 6 years I've been director, but since 2001 when the program was started, it has really paid off. We have become a trusted advisor to the FAA, and through that, we have expanded to do work now with DHS, DOJ. We're doing some work for the Army. We filmed the Air Force's Elephant Walk out at Eielson Air Force Base twice. The last one was 75 aircraft, F-35s, F-22s, and F-16s. We filmed it via drone. And the images, the video was much more stable than what they got flying the Black Hawk. And we heard that the video was released over the weekend by PACAV. We haven't seen it yet, but the person who filmed it for us is one of our good friends, Ryan Marlowe from the State Department of Transportation. And he has an Emmy for drone cinematography for National Geographic. So when we support the Air Force, we bring the best. But it's a case where we have been expanding our reputation, our capability, and we are the trusted advisor, and that has been a very exciting thing. Jimmy went to Commercial Drone Expo 2 weeks ago. He said our team were the rock stars, that everybody was lining up to talk to us because we're doing things other people are not.
Good.
And the FAA actually tells people if you're going to do large drone cargo, you are going to go to Africa or you're going to come to Alaska. That is a very, very important thing, is that we will be the ones who do the large drones first. So let's talk about some of the things going on. First off, we now have a change in terminology, and this is messing up ACUASI's name because the FAA Drone Advisory Committee, which is now the Advanced Aviation Advisory Committee, since they're renaming everything, is decided that unmanned aircraft systems is not gender neutral, and therefore they should be drones.
Oh, so we're back to drones.
So we're back to drones. And in the meantime, they're going to go through this awkward stage where they're using uncrewed aircraft systems in order to keep the UAS acronym. But they do want to go to drones, but uncrewed sounds, well, awkward. And also it's incorrect. We have a crew running these drones. We are not fully autonomous. There is a human in the loop with everything we're doing. And even when they do go slightly more autonomous, there will be a human, what we call on the loop. There will be somebody who will be responsible for the operation of those particular aircraft.
There will still be a crew responsible for the aircraft.
Yes. So that messes up ACUASI, Alaska Center for Unmanned Aircraft Systems Integration. So we're going to do what Stanford Research Institute did and just go to ACUASI. So you will see us stop spelling out our title. I thought about going to the Alaska Center of Excellence for Drones or ACE and got told, well, you're branded as ACUASI, you're stuck with it. So there we go. So beyond visual line of sight, this is still our major sticking point. We have made progress addressing this issue. We have been involved in some major things on this particular issue. That flying beyond the visual line of sight of the pilot in command is the big hurdle we have, because the concern is that if we lose communications link with our aircraft and can't control it, a Cessna 172 will magically pop up right in front of it and will hit it. If you happen to be in the lower 48, the aircraft is a Piper Cub. Up here, it's a 172. So this is a case where we need to make sure that we have the ability on board the aircraft to be able to spot that aircraft in the air and autonomously avoid it. This is one of those holy grails for the FAA. And it's one of the reasons the AOPA and Alaska Airmen's Association and others like our approach, is that we understand that we have to have some responsibility for avoiding a collision. And unlike a lot of other folks who are like, oh, well, we'll just fly under 400 feet and there'll be no traditional aircraft down there and we should just be able to do anything we want to. We fly in Alaska. We know everybody flies under 500 feet. And our program manager for one of our FAA programs got a beautiful look at that as he was flying in an aircraft at 500 feet. And there were two aircraft flying along the river below him. So he got a really good look that in Alaska, we do fly under 500 feet. And it's not just us. There's some sparsely populated areas in the Western United States that are the same. But it means that we have been fighting to make sure that the regulations that are put in are such that we are not endangering the general aviation population here in Alaska. And that puts us on kind of a funny side in some of the discussions about drones and where they should be flying. There was a drone advisory committee, not drone advisory committee, and beyond visual line of sight aviation rulemaking committee that I've got a slide for in a moment. And everybody, it's supposed to be under 400 feet. And the folks in the drone community are like, we should just be able to fly there. General aviation is not allowed there. We should just be able to fly there. It's shielded. And I was on the side with the pilots and the helicopter pilots saying, no, actually, that is not safe. This is not something we should be doing. So I've actually earned some allies in the process of doing this, but it's the reality of where we're flying. So this is going to be the biggest challenge.
Well, even again, the highest priority is maintaining human life.
It's aviation safety.
Aviation safety. Of course, so that makes sense. But as the airspace gets more cluttered, there's also people on the ground. And if these things can't independently detect and avoid, there's always the possibility one day they hit each other. It's not bringing down a aircraft that's full of humans, but it brings down another drone, which then falls down and crashes a car on the highway or comes through somebody's skylight. Is that part of that as well?
So that ground hazard is definitely considered. And so they are working under different operating conditions based on the population density, whether you're urban, suburban, rural. And they really kind of break it down into those three categories. With a lot of the small unmanned aircraft, the small drones, it's going to take me a while to get over to drones. It's a function of if you're flying over heavily populated areas, you need to have parachutes and other mitigations. If you're flying out in a more remote region, they don't consider that to be as big of a risk, and you can do things that don't necessarily have to have that same level of parachute. So there are definitely some interesting aspects on that and in the rulemaking for operations over people. And that is one of those things where trying to define what operations over people is actually really exciting. We had an argument with somebody in the FAA when we were trying to get an operational approval to fly between Penn and the Valley Clinic and Fairbanks Memorial Hospital. And we were told that, we planned a route that, crossed roads at 90 degrees and made sure we flew over large buildings as much as possible to make sure we've decreased the ground hazard. And the question was, were we operating over people? Given we had done flight planning to really avoid being over people and we weren't going to do operations when there were school children present, and we'd done all of that masking, and they couldn't give us a good definition of ops over people. And they said, well, go ahead and do the flight and we'll fine you if we don't like it. That's not acceptable.
Right.
We're not going to fly under those conditions. Okay, our director of operations still wanted to fly under those conditions. I won't let our program fly under those conditions. But it's a case where, in terms of defining, now if it's incidental and you've done all the routes, et cetera, and someone steps out of a building and you're over them inch really quickly, you're fine. But being over an entire group of people, no, you have to have special mitigations. And most of the people flying over parades, et cetera, do not happen to have all of those permissions. And we've already seen some good incidences of drunk drone driving. Greg Foster, who used to be a lieutenant with the Fairbanks Police Department and actually now is part of the ACUASI program as of last week,
Yeah, we started.
was helping with the kids parade with little bicycles down in Valdez. A drunk drone driver ran the drone into a power line, shorted out, fell, hit the ground, and the blade snapped off and hit Greg and hurt him. So of all the people to choose, the person who started the Fairbanks drone program for the police department, so needless to say, there was a police report filed and an FAA report and other things. But so this is something that we are going to need to be concerned about, because it's not the professional operators who are going to be the problem here. It is going to be those who are careless and clueless or criminal. So we're still working on this beyond visual line of sight. And last summer, we did some work with Vigilant Aerospace. And we were doing significant detect and avoid testing. We were running multiple aircraft beyond visual line of sight, only electronic communications required, no human eyes required on the aircraft, multiple at the same time over the Trans-Alaska Pipeline. We were flying traditional aircraft in terms and including helicopters and fixed wings against these systems. We were flying them out at Bradley Airport, Bradley Sky Ranch. So we were offset from the runways and we were watching planes take off and land. So we could see how the detect and avoid equipment dealt with aircraft that were coming into and out of the field of view from above and below. So all of this helps give us confidence in what systems work and what systems don't. Unfortunately, at the moment, we're still in the function of most systems don't work, but we are getting better. The technology is getting better and it's getting smaller so that we can do it on smaller aircraft.
And who's Vigilant Aerospace?
So Vigilant Aerospace is one of our partners, and they are actually funded to work with us through the FAA's qualified commercial entity broad agency announcement. So there were $6 million put into a pot by Congress, and the pot was, you were supposed to work with the test site, but the Congress didn't want to go to the test site directly. For some reason, they just don't think they can give us money directly. And so there was a competition and you had to be partnered with one of the 7 test sites. And the test site had to agree that we would work with you if you got funded, and you had to give money to us. But we had to negotiate what that was. So Vigilant Aerospace was one of the, I think it was the very first one
winner.
Announced.
And they partnered with us.
Yeah.
So essentially, we were the first winner of a BAA, of that BAA.
Simultaneously with that, New Mexico got one too.
Yeah, and what's their focus? Or do they have one?
Detect and avoid.
So their focus is this.
Okay.
So this is what Vigilant has been developing. This is their user interface. And so what you see in this one is you will see there is a red circle, which is the area around your drone. And that is basically, if you're in that area, you're in near miss. The yellow is the well clear. And so you want to keep all other aircraft outside of that well clear. The well clear guarantees you're not going to hit each other. And so what this particular system does is it takes the detect and avoid from all ground-based systems and on aircraft systems and fuses it into one display. And so it tracks the incoming aircraft, which is top left, the detected air traffic, projects the trajectory, then gives you an alert as the drone operator, how do you need to move to avoid that aircraft? And then there are some aircraft where the detect and avoid will automatically follow that. So this is really giving you that situational awareness in 3 dimensions with a how do you manage to maintain well clear. And that's part of what we're looking for, is making sure that we know what's there. Now, for us, we want the autonomous avoid because we don't have great infrastructure up here. You know, it's not a function of building it back better up here. It's building it the first time.
Build it, yeah.
Yeah, so in this particular case, you know, if you happen to have lost link with the aircraft, we want the aircraft to be able to determine that well clear and make sure it's maintained. So this is some really good work. The FAA really likes this.
Where was that, by the way?
That picture was not up here. This
Oh,
was-
okay.
Yeah,
That's a simulated picture of the effect,
No, it's fine.
but where they were doing the trials up near Olness Pond.
we did Olness and we also did Bradley Sky Ranch.
Bradley Sky Ranch, yeah.
So here's a bit of a bonehead question, because I'm not a pilot. But is there like a general protocol or rule, like if you're coming towards another aircraft, you see you're on the same trajectory, that everybody's going to turn left? Because if both planes turn left, they're going to be going in opposite directions.
There is, so what we're also trying to, and you're making a good point. So part of the issue that we run into as this program is.
Oh, I'm all over this. Okay.
But Joan, part of the problem with what we run into as this program is the tech community decided to create drones, forgetting that there is already an aviation community, right? And so we're trying to educate the drone community that you are part of a community that already exists. There are already established rules to the road. You need to learn those rules before we go back to Congress and ask them to come up with new rules, right? So there's a huge education process that our institution has been doing with the drone community. It's one of the reasons we've been more successful, is because of our approach has been from a traditional aircraft, traditional aviation rules approach.
Yeah, so we fundamentally believe that the existing rules are sufficient
Yes.
and that the drone should be obeying the existing airspace rules. The one place where we have a little bit of challenge is the fact that if we are overtaken from behind, we still have to give way, which you don't do with traditional aircraft.
And from a safety perspective, you have to start looking at, are we also like traditional aircraft in these regards?
Are we visible? Can we move fast enough to get out of the way and a bunch of other issues?
Are we communicative in the same caliber, right? Is our pilot in command just as communicative to the tower and to the other pilots and staying in the loop as the others? That's what we're trying to achieve. So you don't know that just because the aircraft is out there, you don't know if it's unmanned or manned. That's the goal.
Now, the challenges with a bunch of the smalls is they're concerned that the number of smalls will overwhelm air traffic control. And so they're trying to come up with methods for reserving airspace and having the small drones communicate with each other. And of course, one of the challenges is we don't have the infrastructure to support that, because it's a lot of 5G or electronic communications between the aircraft, and we don't have the infrastructure.
No, nobody really actually does.
Right. It wasn't built for that.
Well, and not only that, would be like I mentioned earlier, you've got a whole community in the tech world designing something without talking to the FAA or to the aviation community about really what they should be designing. So they created this kind of whole unmanned traffic system without really talking to the aviation community on how to integrate it. And they're still trying to force it in a way. So there's kind of a standstill in the management of how we're going to manage this traffic. And this is where you'll hear Cathy start to hear things like advanced air mobility, advanced air management. That's what we're looking at, this whole integration process of manned and unmanned holistically.
Yeah, right now we're at the stage of we're bringing cars into horses and buggies. There are already rules of the road. People know what they are. but we're at the funny stage where you're walking in front of the car with a lantern or a flag or something.
Yeah.
So we're trying to get past that and to actually do a full integration.
I'm actually thinking more of if hovercrafts suddenly became widely available and pervasive, because they can go on or off the traditional
Well,
roads.
theoretically, because they're not on the ground anymore, they're an aircraft.
Okay.
Once
I'm
you-
not even
not gonna
going
get into
into
that.
this
Let's not
one.
go that far. Okay.
So this is the Aviation Rulemaking Committee for Beyond Visual Line of Sight. This was an FAA rulemaking committee to really get advice from the community, and it had 89 organizations involved. So this was not a small group. This was not a trivial enterprise. And not being dumb, I made sure we got on the right-of-way rules section of this, which was going to be the key portion. And so this was a case of we were there with first responders, with medevac helicopter pilots, with, you know, the people who are providing detect and avoid. It was one heck of a group. And we did not reach consensus. The goal, excuse me, was to reach consensus. We did not, there was no way we were going to, but there were areas where we could reach consensus. And if you want some really fascinating reading, read the appendix to this, to the report, because it has every person on the committee's response to, do you concur, meaning we can live with this? Do you concur with reservations, at which point they'd outline the reservations, or do you not concur? And it would, the do not concur reading is fascinating. The concur with reservations was almost always a plug for their own equipment. And most of the FAA test sites said we can live with this. So it was an interesting breakdown. So go ahead.
If I may, we're kind of hogging the conversation here in the room because we're in the room. I just want to remind everyone, although we're not able to as well monitor the chat box or hand raising today, please, if you have a question or if you have a comment, want further information, please go ahead and just take yourself off mute and fire away. Thanks.
And Gary's got a question.
So when I see that, I think of the J Park and I think of the integration of the new aircraft into the J Park and everything that's gone on in MOAs the last 20 years. Do you fit somewhere? Are you weaving that together? Is that a whole different silo, or how do you handle J Park?
So J Park, we are working with more of a one-on-one. We hadn't really had really strong communications with the military up here. That has changed dramatically. We are helping Eielson set up their own drone program for a bunch of the operations on around the airport. We had 1 2-week period where randomly 2 Fort Wainwright soldiers walked in the door and said, we need help operating in cold temperatures. Can you help us? And of course, we said yes. So we are hyper aware of this, and we have gotten some certificates of authorization or waiver from the FAA to fly our large unmanned aircraft here in interior Alaska. And you'll see some of this coming up later. And it required coordination with the military. Our memorandum of agreement and letter of agreement had to take into account the fact that there were active MOAs, and how would we operate with them? How do we note them? All of those other components, so that we ensure that nothing we do endangers J Park activities. And we know that an F-35 plus a drone would be a very bad thing. And we are not going to be the people who are going to do that. But a lot of the people who are operating the small drones in remote areas don't necessarily pay attention to that. And if you've got an F-35 near Fort Greely, you know, out in that training area, flying just over the treetops, there could be a drone there. And so it really is a function of they need to make sure the airspace is, restricted airspace is activated, because a lot of the common drones will be what are called geofenced. You will not be allowed to take off if you're in an area that is under those restrictions. Having said that, you can, of course, build a system, or there are systems that exist that don't have that geofencing. And so depending on who's operating, et cetera, it could be a risk. And we had a case, boy, earlier this year, I got a phone call saying, we heard that there were 6 drones in the air at the same time near Fort Greely, and it shut down some of their training. Do you know who did it? They knew we wouldn't have done it. But it was a function of trying to find out who in the region had done it, and we weren't able to put our fingers on them through our sources. But that is something of concern, and they shut down the training at Fort Greely in that period.
Well, I'm sure you know, but they're talking of expanding the MOA because of the new 6th generation aircraft. And so this was a pitched battle to get to where we are today, 20 years ago, 15 years ago. So I suspect we'll be back into that. So you folks, well, glad to hear right on the point of the spear, because you're going to be part of that.
And Gary, one of the things we're looking at too is, so the DoD has some specifications that they want for advanced airspace to support those next gen fighters. And right now they really don't have the capabilities inside JPark to support those fighters correctly. And so one of the things we are looking at is, if you are going to build out JPark to support those things, some of the things that they need help with is such as like advanced weather, avionics, things like that. We need those across the state as well. And so when we're looking at kind of creating advanced airspace, it's going to behoove the DoD to be a partner with the state of Alaska to not just build out JPark, but build out the rest of the state of Alaska for advanced airspace. And so that's kind of what we're looking at from a bigger picture perspective. And that's going to help out a lot of what we're trying to do is clean up Alaska's airspace statewide and partner with the DoD to do that.
And this is one of those key things, is we're not operating in a vacuum in ACUASI. We are tied at the hip to the State Department of Transportation, and we're with the State Aviation Advisory Board. We make sure we've got input on a regular basis. We are working with, our regional FAA, and we are talking with the military so that what we're doing is not a surprise to anybody, and that we are in the conversations. We go to the ACMAC, which is the Civil and Military Aviation Committee.
Use acronyms and stuff.
Yeah.
But then you also look at our management agencies inside of Alaska as well, whether it's all that lie under Department of Interior, whether it's forestry, you look at their needs and how they're trying to manage the state along with kind of manage some of their operations inside DoD lands and so forth. There's a lot of synergies. And so one of the big things that Cathy will get to as well is like a big topic like wildfire, right? Where's something we can latch on as a state and bring all of these agencies in together, because they all need some aspect of support on that. And this is one aspect of how we're going to try to take advantage of beyond visual line of sight operations. So, Gary.
Well, I would just offer, thinking back to those battles, that you spend some time with Jim. And the state of Alaska fell flat in their efforts to help with the MOAs. So I wouldn't look to them for any great participation unless things have changed. So I just raise that yellow flag because I think you'll find what Jim found, and it's just better to deal with the military and not deal with the bureaucracy of DOT.
Yeah, so we are happy to deal with the military, and we have some plans in terms of bringing some folks on in a consulting role to help us on that front. Because with the way we're growing with the size of our aircraft, we're going to be bringing up some converted Cessna Grand Caravans.
Yeah.
These are not small aircraft. So
like soon. Wow.
Yeah, like within the next 6 months.
Wow. Thank you.
Yeah, so it's important, and we appreciate any advice along those lines. So anybody who has that advice, jump in, feel free to give it to us. We will listen and we will obey.
I know a guy who's got a lot of extra free time since January. Lots of aviation experience. And good military connection.
Let's see, would that be start with a K?
No, start with Jim Dawson.
Oh, Jim is a good person to have on our side. All right, so.
Oh, and I just saw him this weekend too.
Cool. Yeah, we need to catch up with Jim. Jim's
No, I meant,
awesome. Oh, General Crum.
Crum.
Yeah, so General Crum was just given a picture over the weekend taken from our elephant walk. So that picture, I believe, was from our drone. All right, so in terms of larger unmanned aircraft, this is something that you guys have heard about us doing before. So 5 years ago, we got a contract from Transport Canada. They hate contracting Americans. They are trying to get their own system set up. And we were told it was 3 years base, 2 years optional. This contract could not be changed anyway, no way, no how, forget about it, don't even think about it. And at the end of year 4, and the first 3 years, we were basically, first 2 years, we were basically in a pilot phase. Now we are actually part of their standard operations, looking for North Atlantic right whales in the St. Lawrence Seaway, using our artificial intelligence payload. Well, at the end of last year, we didn't have enough money left on the contract, but we did have one potential option year available. And apparently when the upper decks learned that we weren't coming, they came unglued. And so suddenly the thou shalt never modify the contract had its ceiling raised by $1 million Canadian, of which we got 800,000. And so we went back this year and, we did our standard, take a picture. I've looked, I can't spot a whale in that photo, but the artificial intelligence can spot the underwater whale. And the photographs are good enough when the whale's on the surface, you can determine species and gender. So this is a case where DFO, Department of Fisheries and Oceans in Canada, is looking at the photos and is slowing traffic in the St. Lawrence Seaway in response to our images and our alerts. So they ran a system against us this year. They ran a different aircraft with a different artificial intelligence payload. And the phrase was, it's not ready. So we've already been asked if we can now extend the thou shalt never modify it contract for next year and add money to it. So apparently we're still beating the Canadians. But this is something where this is incredibly important for ACUASI because we've flown over 30,000 nautical miles beyond visual line of sight using satellite command and control for most of it. And we keep feeding this information back to the FAA, usually with me thumbing my nose at the same time. But it's a function of we have more experience than any of the other test sites in terms of flying beyond visual line of sight. And this is true. This is not with ground-based radars. This is us flying in the middle of nowhere and reporting back. And if you run Flight Aware and you stick our tail numbers in, N372 UA and N347 UA, you can actually spot us in the airspace. If you write quickly, Gary, it's up there.
Cool, thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, so it's a great way to determine if it's a flight day for the guys without bugging them. I pull up Flight Aware, put the tail numbers in, I see if they're flying. If they're not, then I know it's a weather day or an off day or something, and I don't have to bug them. They love nothing more than the boss calling saying, are you flying in the middle of a flight?
I think it's 371. Is it 371?
372.
372.
372 and 347.
Oh, 347.
And UA is the last.
I don't know what numbers. Gary, why are you asking me important questions?
So.
I was talking to Cathy.
All right, so in terms of this, that operation has been really important for that experience and for the trust that Transport Canada is giving us. NAV Canada has been involved. So between Transport Canada and NAV Canada, we have their equivalent of the FAA, and they have been helping us improve the aircraft. So we have the most advanced sea hunters in the world right now because they have been modified in ways that were not done at the manufacturer. The manufacturer has incorporated a lot of what we have done into their aircraft. So all of this gets important when you start talking about doing beyond visual line of sight operations and things like disaster response. And so we are part of a disaster response project that talks about coordinating the efforts across all of the agencies in the disaster response. This has been really important, and we've been leading the way in terms of earthquakes, volcanoes, ice jams, a whole bunch of other things. They also have terrorist activities and train derailments and a bunch of other things. But we are really leading in pandemic and volcanoes since we win in those categories. So this has been important. So who has the assets? How are you going to deploy them if there happens to be an emergency response? So we know what DOT has, DOT knows what we have. We know where each other's aircraft are. If something goes wrong, we may leverage them, they may leverage us. And so we would be able to get eyes on if a bridge collapsed, or, you know, you want to check the railroad to make sure that something hasn't happened to the tracks. So this is something that is going to be really important in the future, is we use the assets that are available in the region, we use them cooperatively with a common operating system to ensure that we have safety, we don't have people interfering with emergency response. You don't want to drone up filming for, you know, insurance purposes when they're trying to do search and rescue. So how do you make sure that everybody knows what their place is and what the time and operating conditions are? And we're also now using them to look at areas with high avalanche potential. And we are now going into the fun part where we are actually talking about dropping explosives to start the avalanches. So this is going to be fun. We've got some projects coming up that needs to say all of us want to go play.
But also, we're really looking at this for the state as a financial savings for them, and what they're spending for human capital out. And a lot of times, you know, they're finding out that they're misfiring, you know, when they're out with their howitzer, if they're firing at the wrong times. So we're also looking at huge cost savings for state.
And Alaska Railroad.
And Alaska Railroad as
very
well.
much on top of this.
For their avalanche. So not just cost savings, but actually a much more targeted and effective response for avalanche mitigation.
So this uses drones of all different sizes for the surveillance.
Yeah, I know the military is quite involved, and of course, a lot of their stuff they try to keep secret, and so it's quite a job trying to coordinate or be able to work with them. But, you know, you have other agencies which are more or less public, or, you know, in general, but you got your hands full.
We do, but when it's an emergency response, if the military says we've got this area,
Yeah.
we're going to give it to them.
Oh,
And
really?
then we'll work on some of the other areas.
Good,
And that's part of all of this, is
Yeah.
deconflicting
yeah.
who is operating where. And if there's a case where they've got a wildfire that's leaving their lands into public lands, okay, non-military lands, we would be willing to come help respond in terms of monitoring, et cetera. So that's a case where you work well together,
Yeah,
because they don't have the operational authority to fly on state lands, whereas we do. So there's definitely some things there. So collaboratively, we're much stronger than separately, and that's the whole part of these projects. So large unmanned aircraft, large drones. We now have a hangar at Fairbanks International Airport. Since we last talked to you guys, we have an airport hangar. That's an old Bryce hangar. If you have interest, we will get you down to see it. That picture is 3 Sentries and our Sea Hunter. Sea Hunter's 16-foot wingspan, Sentry is 13 foot. And in terms of this, we got it in preparation for conducting flights from the Fairbanks International Airport runways. The governor thought this was one of the coolest things ever, which was just a lot of fun. He came out, started asking questions, asked questions for half an hour straight, and then had fun playing with the simulator, which we refer to as the addictive hook to getting folks interested in what we're doing. But all of this led to us doing our first operations of a large drone at Fairbanks International Airport on May 22nd. This was hilarious. The airport got the Facebook post out before we did. They were more excited than we were, and we worked 4 years to get the permissions. And
But that's good though, right?
it was good.
Have that community, you know, have the airport behind this is really
Oh,
important, right?
So air traffic control said the operations were seamless. We had a flight instructor in the pattern with us who said we were just like any other aircraft. That is what we want. We want
Amazing.
full integration, as non-exciting as possible. We want a non-event event.
Not a bit of it.
And we had a good turnout in terms of folks who come to watch, including Frank Murkowski. He showed up to see what was going on. And it was a lot of fun. There were kids running around inside the contained area. And, you know, we're working on the next generation already. But so really good event there. And this is leading up to what we're probably going to do in the next month and a half.
Jump. Just to ask, so what is the max number per tour of the facility?
How
Sure,
many?
Angela.
How many are
trying to
you
set us up
thinking?
here for, Joe?
Field trip.
We-
Then there's a whole range, there's a number of
The
places,
chamber
I think
brought-
the,
I would say a year and a half ago, the chamber asked to bring their board and the interior delegation through. So I want to say we had close to 40.
Yeah, it's
Okay.
40.
So
It's a pretty large hangar, and if it's not too cold, we can open the door and have people kind of mosey in and
Yeah.
out.
under 50 would be
no,
nice.
it's fine. I was really, again, there are a number of things we've talked about for years and years here. I just wonder if the gang would like to do some field
We
trips.
We'd be
absolutely
happy.
accommodate. You're good.
We've done the Isabelli board, we've done a whole bunch of folks, so.
We had J Bear folks, so we had Wainwright and Eielson folks at one point, and I want to say there's 25 of them at one point. That was a decent size.
Yeah, I don't remember that. I remember the 7 colonels and lieutenant colonels.
Yeah.
That's about right.
Mhm.
Okay.
We had most of them.
Well,
And
thank you in advance. I think I'll
Yeah.
be contacting you all to see if, again, if there's anyone interested here at the Energy Task Force, we'll see about getting a nice tour of ACUASI.
And the reason you might want to see this is because in the next month and a half, knock on wood, we're gonna do this, which is Fairbanks to Nenana with Sea Hunter.
Oh, good.
So we have permission to fly at Fairbanks, we have permission to fly at Nenana, and we now have the corridor between the two. And you will notice that corridor goes south of the river. Why are we going south of the river? To avoid all the air traffic that is flying over the river.
Yeah.
This will be chase planed. We will have a chase plane with the aircraft to make sure we have situational awareness. This is part of the FAA's Beyond program to really break beyond visual line of sight, and this is in the aspect of cargo. And of course, everything we do here is applicable to long distance infrastructure. And Sea Hunter, of course, is our preferred aircraft for doing the full Trans-Alaska Pipeline. And we're hoping to do that within the next 2 years as well. So this is exciting. This is really exciting.
And not only this, but this is our route planning, right? This is our initial stop, get out, and then we make the dog leg to go out to Galena. And that's really kind of our goal, right? Is in the next few years is we would like to have full unmanned cargo between Fairbanks and Galena developed, not just for the FAA, but for the state of Alaska. So that way we can start getting moving on this. But this is kind of this first step in developing this pathway for unmanned cargo.
So this is proof of principle followed by doing the Fairbanks to Galena proof of principle. And the reason Fairbanks Galena is a hub, and then you demonstrate hub and spoke with smaller aircraft. And in terms of doing this, we're doing it with Sea Hunter, but we're doing it with a bunch of other partners. And the number of partners we have has gone up significantly. Merck Pharmaceutical did a paid medical supply delivery between Allakaket and Alatna last spring. Unfortunately, the company they were partnered with has gone out of business.
They were a classic startup. They went too big, too fast.
But so the press release hasn't made it out. We still need to work on that with Merck. But we're working with 3 converted Cessna Grand Caravan companies that are coming up here. One of them is funded to work with us right now in California for FAA Next Gen. One is funded to work with us through the test site broad agency announcement like Vigilant. And the third one we're working with, we don't have funding to work with them, but they're very interested. And one of the interesting things is UPS. Yes, that UPS is very interested in what we're doing.
And UPS is working with all 3 of them.
It's working with all 3 of them.
Yeah.
And is working with us. And so this is a case where we are moving things forward. Phoenix Solutions is one of our partners, and they are type certifying an aircraft so it can be flown as a military specifications aircraft for the military, but also in the National Airspace System as an approved aircraft. If it gets through, it will be one of the first aircraft ever type certified. And they're making really good progress.
Very good progress. They have a significant contract with the Marines.
So, and then our funding increases. So 2 major contracts, Cold Regions Research Engineering Laboratory, 8 million. That is for developing basically a mobile system to detect drones around troops under that are moving. Federal Aviation, that 4.05 million, that is our portion of a $14 million contract. It is the largest research grant actually ever given through the FAA, through the Center of Excellence program. This is to do counter drone. So this is to guarantee the safety of the national airspace system when counter drone systems are used. So does it interfere with first responder communications? Does it interfere with navigational aids? And we're going to be doing some serious testing with that in the near future. And then the state of Alaska gave us 10 million. And
Counter drone, what does that mean?
it means taking enemy drones out of the airspace. So if somebody is flying criminally or in, say, Ukraine, the Russians, you want to take one of their drones out. These are the systems that would take them out. What's really funny is my brother is doom scrolling Ukraine at all times and said, they've got this really cool system, you know, by D-Drone. It's called the Drone Defender. Well, we're working with D-Drone. And then he said, and they've just been given a whole bunch of in situ aircraft. And I'm like, every single one of those will have been flown under a University of Alaska banner for testing. So we are supporting the Ukraine effort. But this is a case where the counter is really important. And for us, it's a matter of critical infrastructure. You don't want people flying unauthorized drones into Ted Stevens airspace. You could shut down Ted Stevens as a cargo airport. Now, as a Fairbanks person, I don't really object to that quite as much as, you know, the Anchorage folks would, because they'd all come up here. But it is really bad form to do that. And you want to make sure that you're not shutting down that pathway. And, you know, we've got the Trans-Alaska Pipeline. We need to make sure that if someone is going to do something adverse, we are thinking about it and ready to go. And we need to protect our military bases. And they're running some of these systems, but they really haven't been tested under Alaskan conditions.
Yeah.
So we're going to be testing some of those limits this winter.
And then there's on the flip side, there's the commercial applications in the long-term thinking of this is as we're working on the counter drone, its ability to do things that what it's achieving is detecting, you know, and mitigating drones for beyond visual line of sight. What we're going to do is detect, and instead of mitigate, we're then going to avoid. So there is some practical applications for us doing counter drone as
Yeah,
well.
very, very similar. The first steps are the same. You detect, you identify, you track. The other thing that's not on here, just because I was not paying attention, is Senator Murkowski gave us $2 million of congressionally directed funding through the earmark to do counter drone with local law enforcement agencies in 12 communities across the state. So we will work with the local law enforcement agencies for them to be able to develop maps of where people are using the drones. And if somebody, you know, for example, if you set out the system and you're just listening for where they are and triangulating them. If you determine that this one particular park in the flight path of an airport suddenly has drone activity at 3 o'clock each day, right when school gets let out across the street, you can go intercept and do education. If you see someone doing something criminal, this system can actually detect where the controller is, and you can send them to talk to the person who's flying the aircraft. So this is something we're hoping will support local law enforcement and, you know, give them some more information about what's going on in their communities.
And the thing that's actually really nice about these programs that we've gotten involved in, one, we were somewhat sort of handpicked for these programs because of our expertise, but we're already, and Cathy's being really modest about those numbers because we're already being asked in most of these programs to start looking at not just next year, but year 3 and year 4 of plussing them up. So those are incredibly light on what those numbers are. And we actually expect those to grow significantly over the next few years.
And our FAA numbers have gone up significantly beyond this. So we ended up with, at the end of June, we got a call, and this was the first time this has ever happened. The FAA wanted to sole source to us as a test site. They've never done this before. And they had a draft request for proposals that had not cleared legal and said, we want you to respond in a week and a half They had us under contract in 2 weeks and 4 days.
Oh,
I don't even think the RFP had hit the street and we were under contract.
Yeah, no, it hadn't hit the street. It was sole source. It was us only for $925,000 to work with X-Wing, which is one of the top Grand Caravan converters. And
They're
then,
an alphabet company.
and we are now under contract with a different organization with NextGen to do urban air mobility, which is air taxis. So we're working with Joby and Archer and a couple of the major companies there, Boeing, you know, not small companies.
It's out of our Monterey facilities.
And so that one, we have an authorization to proceed and we've never written the proposal, which is not the way it normally works. So things really are going well. It's a function of people hear about us. They're hearing word of mouth through the community that we are trustworthy and that we are doing a good job. So where do we go from here? I need to finish up. I know we're getting close to 9. The governor and the state put that 10 million in. This is 1-year money. So we're starting with hiring faculty, support drone aerospace curricula at UA. That is 2 tenure track faculty in engineering and 2 faculty for the CTC, Community and Technical College, to work on drone certificates. We're identifying locations and beginning to establish 3 emerging technologies test ranges. One will be the Fairbanks region, primarily at Nenana, to be able to do airport operations in kind of our neck of the woods without interrupting FAI too much. And we are going to be accelerating that DAA testing and the flights for the Beyond program, to really breaking that detect and avoid barrier, being able to do beyond visual line of sight before this program turns into a pumpkin.
But Nenana over the next 5 to 10 years should see a nice economic development boom and in the significant, something they've never seen before kind of boom. So
Yep. So in the next month and next year months,
Airfield.
we were going to be working with partners in the first converted Cessna Grand Caravans in Alaska. There will be safety pilots on board. So if anybody's freaking out, no, they're autonomous systems, but they have a pilot on board. We'll do the first drone mission between Fairbanks and Nenana. We're going to go back to Canada for whale monitoring. We're going to do flight campaigns for drone detection, tracking, identification, and mitigation. And then we're going to continue our work with State of Alaska Department of Transportation. And of course, we're going to keep up on the STEM activity. We love doing STEM outreach. If you want to watch our crotchety old pilots get excited, give them a room full of kids and they will intentionally talk about FaceGram and Snapbook, and the kids go crazy. It is hilarious.
Yes.
But we're getting kids excited about learning and everything from, you know, talking to them about careers. You know, you can be a biologist and use drones. You know, you can be a real estate agent and use drones. So, you know, really not just making them think about drones in terms of the aerospace, but in terms of all these other options. And so in terms of that counter drone,
Or did you mean to jump?
yes, I meant to jump, just because we're at 8:57.
Yep.
So this particular case, this is one of the areas that we are going to be, you're going to see a lot more activity. And part of this is our ground hazard, and the fact that they really need to operate at our temperatures is going to be important. So really, the reality is University of Alaska, us here at ACUASI, we are going to really lead that way to routine. I haven't completely scrubbed this of drone yet, of UAS yet, operations in Alaska. And we're going to lead the world. I mean, we are leading the world. That is where we're going. Senator Murkowski, when I left ENR, Energy and Natural Resources, told me to take over the UAS world, and we're going to do it.
Good.
So it's exciting. We have a lot going on.
and this is, there's even bigger news coming in the next probably 2 months. So keep abreast
Any
of
other
that.
questions?
Right. Well, I would open up the floor. Go ahead and stop sharing so we can all see each other. All right.
Is there a list that we could get on that just gets updates on a regular basis?
There isn't, but that's a really good idea. So the listserv right now is Alina. She's the one who is getting us more together in terms of public relations, et cetera. We did a stakeholder charrette and brought together folks from across the state to talk about a quasi-strategic planning and where we needed to be in the future. And one of the things that came up again and again is we need a PIO. We need a public information officer who can get our story out, because we're not good at it. We're a little too busy like doing things.
Right.
So this is actually really important.
I see, Mayor Hopkins.
Yeah, thank you very much. This is an incredible presentation, Cathy, as always. Thank you for the incredible effort that you go 48 hours a day, so I don't understand it. But my question is, as we recall, local governments were quite involved in working to establish some of the bases that you now operate so well. How is local government around, or how are local governments around the state participating to build that support for you?
So in terms of the legislature, we have really good support, especially from people like Representative Alana, because of course we're looking at Palmer. There are a bunch of people who see that, you know, we're putting money actually into University of Alaska Southeast for their environmental studies program where they're using drones, and we're helping Anchorage with some of their aviation technology. And the fact we're trying to do courses that can be distance delivered across the state and really get folks involved in all these different aspects means we've got really good support. And of course, we were one of the bargaining chips, unfortunately, in the budget in the past year. And we nearly had the 10 million taken out. If they hadn't gone to conference, we'd lost it.
I remember that.
Yeah, so Click Bishop, bless his heart, and Bart LeBon, we have great support in the Senate and the House with the two of them. They did a fabulous job. So we are grateful to Senator Bishop and Representative LeBon. So it is a case of we have good support, and as we've been talking to folks and what it means to their area, and really trying to set up the drone economy across the state. You know, we're going to need people who turn these aircraft around in communities. We're going to need business leaders. We're working with our local air carriers, the stakeholders, the stakeholder charrette. We had 30 people from across the state give us 2 days to help with strategic planning. And we had everybody from Victor Joseph from Tandem Chiefs Conference to Jacques Cloutier from Alaska Pipeline Service Company. You know, we had really good results. We had folks from Everett's Air Cargo. We had Northern Air Cargo. I mean, it was a tremendous outpouring of people who see the value and are helping us. So we've got good support. Then of course, here in the Fairbanks North Star Borough, we just have amazing support from everybody. And you know, when the borough set us as it said, Fairbanks International Airport is the international unmanned aircraft, you know, cargo airport. We're going to do that. And this is something we took that one to heart and are running with it. And the airport has been such a wonderful partner that we're excited about it. And in fact, we owe them a barbecue. And they were talking about the second week of October, which translates to we can throw it, but I won't be here.
That's cool.
So
Indoor barbecue.
what we're going to do is we're going to get Big Daddies delivered, I think.
Excellent.
So
Thank you very much for that very detailed response. Thank you.
All right, well, we are at the top of the hour. Ms. Burgraff, you have something for us?
Well, I really like your presentation, and
In your work.
you're using high tech here too, and you'll, after you talk, it's printed out. And but it is really exciting, and you folks are doing a great job. A lot of challenges ahead, but it's something that needs to be done, and so kudos, you know, to you folks.
Thank you.
You
it's,
mentioned open.
go ahead. I was gonna say, it's easy to do and it's easy to be passionate about because we see a need and we see how valuable it is potentially for the people of this community.
You mentioned UPS. Do you also have FedEx contacts?
We do. In fact, we are about to be in a meeting for 2 days with FedEx. They're Memphis folks. They're doing on airport operations.
Never got guaranteed overnight delivery.
Well, I see that on the plane line every day at 11 o'clock.
But yes, no, they're FedEx and UPS are also both partnered with the 3 caravan conversion companies. And so we're all kind of meeting together to kind of figure this out together.
they're weirdly competing, but also not against each other, because
Yeah.
right now we have the only unique environment that's gonna offer them a place to do real commercial activity, so.
And we made sure that they're partnered with Everett Air Cargo and the local carriers.
Yeah.
Cathy, I have a last minute question for you.
Go for it.
Are you talking to people at DGGS about doing airborne mineral surveys?
We are, I think Jimmy and Eyal have been the ones primarily on those discussions.
Yeah, John, it's right now, it's a function of being able to perform the mission that they're asking us to do, and we don't quite have the permissions to do that. So when I met with Masterman about a year ago on what he wants to do for his seismic sensor is about a 1,500-pound sensor, and they're flying at map of the earth with a Navajo. And so that's actually a great mission for those unmanned caravans. We just don't have the permission to fly beyond visual line of sight with them yet. So yes, we're in conversations with them and Leslie and figuring out kind of what the next steps can be. But they absolutely understand the need that they have in terms of presenting, their survey information to the federal government. I think there's a requirement to be done in the next 10 years for all new seismic and mapping of Alaska.
And John's also looking at hyperspectral.
Yeah.
For those minerals in particular. When we can, fly some smaller payloads.
Right.
But it takes longer to do if we're not using the larger one. But it's the FAA, it's that beyond visual line of sight barrier that we are trying so hard to overcome. And that's why we're tackling that one preferentially, is because if we can get the technologies to enable beyond visual line of sight operations, we've just opened Alaska.
Yeah. But yes, we to answer your question, yes, we are in long conversations with them about developing ConOps for surveying.
Okay, great. Thank you.
All right. Well, we are a little bit beyond the top of the hour. So thank you very much for coming. Thank you, Dr. Cahill. Thank you, Mr. Parrish, both for your presentation, but also for your work. I am honored to be able to serve on one of ACUASI citizen advisory boards. And it's a real pleasure and certainly an incredible educational experience. Speaking of educational experiences, I promised I would announce this one more time. So here's we close the meeting. Just to remind the Energy for All Alaska Task Force, anyone who is interested in micro nuclear, small scale nuclear, our friends over at the Alaska Center for Energy and Power are hosting a town hall energy discussion tomorrow. That is Wednesday, September 21st, commencing at 5:30 p.m. in the Noel Ween Library Auditorium with the title Small Scale Nuclear Energy, an Option for Alaska. And so I would strongly encourage all of our members to go participate in that town hall. Should be very interesting information. All right, well, that's all I have for today, everybody. Everyone have a great rest of your day, a great week. Hopefully see you all tomorrow. And we'll see you soon here at the Energy for All Alaska Task Force.
Thank you all for coming.
Thank you.
Good job.